Hey, good day everyone, and welcome to your 767 LOA Webcast. I'm Captain Steve Hyde from the Communications Committee, and joining me today are two members of your negotiation team, Captain Scott Larsen and First Officer Andrew Minney. Thank you guys for showing up, and appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
For those of you who haven't participated in a webcast before, right below the video screen of this webpage, you'll see an area where you can ask a question. Just go ahead and take your cursor, click into the box, and start typing. Once you're satisfied with your question, hit the box below that. It says Submit Question, and it will be sent directly to us here in the studio. Now, my plan is just to present the questions anonymously. I will not identify the emailer or the person asking the question, so feel free to ask whatever you want to about the LOA. Just like training, there are no dumb questions. And with that, Scott, as we wait for the questions to start streaming in, how about a quick review of the 767 negotiating process up to this point, and then the guiding principle your team used as you were negotiating this LOA?
Sure, Steve, and welcome everybody. 767 negotiations started out in July of last year. As everybody can remember, in December of 2011, FedEx announced that they were going to buy the 767 aircraft. After that announcement, we waited and waited to hear from the company, and they came to us in July of 2012 and said they wanted to talk about how the 767 would come on the property and be operated. The company's first proposal was a very low proposal. It basically consisted of a standalone bid pack of a 757 with 767 flying in it. It didn't meet any of the goals or tenets that the MEC, the negotiating committee, and the officers had for the 767. Our driving goals were to honor seniority, protect wide-body flying, and not be concessionary. And as a macro goal for the entire contract, have as clear language as possible and be as transparent as possible in our processes. So after the company made their first proposal back in July, we waited and waited to see how we thought the 767 should operate on the property. We made our first proposal on the 767 in October. Since October until just recently, when the TA was reached on the 767 LOA, about 7 passes were made at the table. And each time we got closer and closer to where we wanted to be with the 767. And the end product of that is the LOA that's before the membership for ratification now.
All right, thank you. Okay, Scott, first question coming in. Why'd we choose separate bid packs?
All right, separate bid packs. Initially, we wanted separate bid packs, but I don't think it's any surprise to everybody and to the line pilot that the company, one of the main driving factors for the company buying the 767 was to exercise the common type rating with the 757. So with that understanding, we looked at separate bid packs. The company was not interested in a separate bid pack unless that separate bid pack was a 757 containing the 767 flying. And as we progressed, we found that the best way to balance some of the company's needs in the common type rating while still honoring seniority and protecting wide-body flying was what is contained now in the LOA. It's separate bid packs. You're awarded your seat by our current Section 24 standing bid processes, just like we bid every other seat in the company. You hold the 767 award, you're a wide body for all pay and purposes, just like an MD-11 pilot is, 777 or Airbus pilot. We keep the bid packs separate all the way through monthly bidding, ITU training, vacation, everything else. The bids are, your monthly bid is awarded, and then open time's released. We're still in separate bid packs all the way down to the reserve assignment window. At that point, the open time and the pilot on reserve are blended into a common pool. The open time trips for a reserve assignment, and the company, just as they do now, will assign those trips in sheer leveling order without respect to the aircraft gauge, whether it's a 7.5 or a 7.6, or the pilot, whether he's a 7.5 or a 7.6 pilot. They will then assign the trip in who is ever up first in leveling order. If they run through and can't assign the trip in reserve, the company, as they can do now, can break the trip up under 25G5. If they don't do that, they can also then go to volunteer. Volunteer goes back to the segregated pools. So if it's a 7-6 trip, it would be a volunteer trip available in the 7-6. Same for the 7-5. If nobody is available for the volunteer on the volunteer list, it would then go to draft. The draft is a common pool, again, just like reserves. So it would go just as draft is assigned now in reverse seniority order with a place marker for the last person that accepted a draft trip. And then the next trip for draft would start at that point again.
All right, thanks. Andrew, how will reserve pilots be compensated?
Reserve pilots, basically, I'll start with the 767. That's the easiest one to go with first. 767 pilot would be awarded his reserve line. He would have his min bid period guarantee, RLG, at, let's say, for example, 70 hours, and he would be compensated at his hourly pay rate for his years of service. A 757 pilot is again awarded a RLG and has a min bid period guarantee of, let's say, 70 hours, and he would be compensated the narrow body pay rate. If he flies a 767 trip on reserve, let's say it was a 20-hour 767 trip, he would be compensated on the following paycheck on the 15th, his adjustment paycheck. He would be compensated the difference in hourly pay rates between his narrow body pay rate and his wide body pay rate at 20 credit hours for the trip that he flew as it's on the 767.
All right. Can I bid into either bid pack each month?
No. The bids are going to be, it's like a Section 24, filling of vacancies bid, and you will be awarded that crew position. So if you're awarded the 767 captain crew position, that is the bid pack that you will be in. You don't move back and forth each month between the 757 or the 767 bid packs.
All right. Perhaps this has been addressed before. How long is the training anticipated to take for someone already qualified on the 757?
For a 757 pilot who holds a Section 24 award to the 767, the training is anticipated to be simply a differences training that'll be consisted of LMS or CBT training, as well as going off-site for classic training, more than likely at Boeing Field for the classic cockpit differences. We understand that's probably 2 to 3 simulator events, and then you're qualified to operate the classic airplane.
Second part of his question here is, what is the 6-month bid assignment commitment we've talked about?
The 6-month bid assignment deals with the special bid award that's contained in the LOA. We had to have a way to fence off some of the flying for the classic airplanes. As it works, there are 3 possible configurations we can have between the 7.5 and 7.67 aircraft. You have the difference between the 2 aircraft. We also have what we call the classic configuration, which are the round dial airplanes. First 4 767s we're receiving are in this configuration. The second is the advanced cockpit 767 aircraft, which will be the follow-on aircraft, and the original round dials will be modified at some point in the future. And the third configuration, obviously, are the current 757 advanced cockpit aircraft we have now. The FAA only lets you exercise your common type rating in 2 of the 3 configurations. So once we do get all 3 configurations on the property, forever how long that period is, it may be a couple of months, it may be longer than that, as the airplanes are modded. So when that happens and all 3 mix types of aircraft are on the property, the classic airplanes will be fenced off in an SBA, very much like SEBA flying is fenced off in the 727 and the Airbus today. Special lines will be designated as SBA lines, and you will have to bid within the bid pack an SBA, special bid award. That SBA will be up to 6 months long, and just like SEBA, you could be inversed in that as well if not enough pilots bid it, and you can only be inversed once in 14 months for it.
Okay, and finally, the third question here is, what is the company's longer-term plan for the 767 on cities? Andrew?
The cities they've shared with us so far were domestic cities. They were going to do a nighttime and a daytime turn on the airplane for those cities. They had a couple of transcon routes they had planned in there. Looking forward, I can only speculate as what they're planning on doing, but I could probably see in the future they could be doing some international flying with the 767. But I think primarily it's going to stay, as a domestic airplane.
All right, thank you. Okay, guys, what protection do we have to prevent the company from exploiting the 13-hour credit hour delta between the 7.5 and the 7.6 bid packs to have more pilots on the narrow body rates than wide body pilots available to take what should be a 7.6 trip or even line? Example, they consistently build the 7.6 bid pack to an average 68-hour guarantee, while the 7.5 is built to 81 hours in a 4-week bid period.
Well, Steve, and we'll talk about our formulas on how we're going to capture the wide body flying in the 767 here in a minute. But for that question, contractually, the company's required to maintain within a seat in a bid pack the spread to be 13 hours. That's a contractual requirement. There currently isn't a contractual requirement across the fleet as far as the spread goes. And we saw that problem before during 4A2B. That is something we're addressing elsewhere in the contract, specifically in Section 25 about a fleet spread. And as far as being able to build high and low BLGs, first off, you can't build to a 68 BLG unless they're buying up the lines. About the lowest you can build in a 4-week month is 70.5 hours. But this known 767 flying that's known at the time the bid pack is published, has to be published and located in the 767 bid pack. Our staffing formula will capture that. So it's known flying, and it has to be covered in the 767 bid pack and flown by 767 pilots until it gets down to reserve. And in reserve is the common pool that we talked about earlier. So let's talk about the staffing formula for a second. It's fairly simple, and it works like this. We take the scheduled credit hours. That's a known amount of flying at the time the bid pack is published. We have that number, and the PSIT and the SIG group has that number for each bid pack when the pairings are generated, the final pairings are generated. We take the scheduled credit hours of the 767, and we divide that by the sum of the 757 and 767 credit hours. So 7.6 divided by 7.5 and 7.6. That gives us the scheduled credit hour ratio. We then take the number of pilots and use the same similar formula. The number of 7.6 pilots divided by the sum of 7.5 and 7.6 pilots. That gives us our minimum staffing ratio. If the minimum staffing ratio is below the scheduled credit hour ratio, the company is undermanned and they'll pay a penalty for that.
Okay, great. Okay, next page. If a crew member is hurt while on R24 under the penalty clause, how will they be paid while recovering? 7.6 pay rate or 7.57 pay rate? And then what if they end up on long-term disability?
Okay, if you're awarded the R24 penalty line for that bid period, for everything you do, you're going to be compensated at the wide body pay rate. So if you were sick for some of your trips, you would be paid out of the wide body pay rate. The next month, now you'd have to bid that line and be awarded that penalty line again. If you were, you would still be getting paid the wide body pay rate. If you go out on long-term disability, you would defer back to your awarded crew position pay rate, which would be the narrow body pay rate.
Okay, hey, before I go any further, I guess there's been some complaints about the video not coming in. If you're having any problems with receiving this video, go up to your top of the page there and go ahead and refresh the web page there, and it should get your video started again. Second part of that question is, why did we handle sections 9A1, 11L1, 11M1, and 11N2 as we did?
Well, first of all, this is dealing with the instructors. The company, as one of the things with the dual type rating, needs to have 7.5 instructors be able to instruct on the 7.6 aircraft, and vice versa, 7.6 instructors to instruct on the 7.5 aircraft. And that's what those all address. And it is some relief from the current contract in those 3 or 4 sections that you cited. Instructors will bid Section 24 awards just like line pilots. And if they're a 7.6 instructor by Section 24 standing bid award, a 7.6 pilot, they're paid wide body for everything they do. If they are a 7.5 pilot by Section 24 award and they're a 7.5 instructor, they'll be paid narrow body for what they do unless they are checking or instructing on a 767 aircraft, and then they'll be paid just like Andrew talked about the reserves being paid. The difference in their narrow body pay and their wide body pay at their longevity for what they do in the 767 aircraft on the 15th of the next month.
Why are there no lookbacks to validate scheduled credit hours versus actual credit hours?
Using actual credit hours flown was in one of the company's early proposals. Frankly, it's not a number that we have. It's a number that the company would generate and give to us. And we felt there's a possibility there to maybe cook the books a little bit on that number. It didn't capture what we wanted to capture. The scheduled credit hours is a known number, as I said before. The PSIT SIG group gets that number when the final pairings are generated before the bid pack is built. It's much more trackable. It's a transparent number. This is also the first time anywhere in the contract that we have any kind of staffing ratio for our aircraft, which I think is important as well.
All right. Can a 7.6 pilot be given a 7.5 trip as substitution? Andrew?
Yes, 767 pilot, if we put into substitution, he could be assigned a 757 trip. Obviously, he would be compensated the wide body pay rate for flying that 757. Vice versa, a 757 pilot could be in substitution and he could be assigned a 767 trip in his sub window. As for a 757 pilot, it's a little more difficult because he'd be compensated for his trip guarantee or sub guarantee, and then if he was assigned a 767 trip, he would then be compensated like a reserve, where he would be given the credit hour value of the trip he flew on the 767, the difference in pay rates. He would be compensated on the 15th of next month for that pay.
All right. Next question. Are other areas of the contract on hold while we decide on this LOA?
Steve, that's an excellent question. And the answer to that is a categorical no. The 767 discussions began while we were doing the interim discussions, and they were run in a parallel track along with the interim discussions. We negotiated both at the same time, staying on our schedule, our planned schedule on the interim talks. As we entered Section 6, we came to this LOA fairly quickly, so nothing in Section 6 negotiations has been put on hold or delayed as a result of the 767 LOA being negotiated, now sent out to the membership for ratification.
Okay. Andrew, can a 7.5 pilot be drafted for a 7.6 trip before all 7.6 pilot options are exhausted?
Yes, they could. The draft list is one pool of 757 and 767 pilots. So the way 25.0 reads, which is draft, they start at the bottom of the list and they work their way up the list trying to assign out the draft trip. Once they get to that point, then they put in a place marker, and then the next time a draft trip came available, they would start at that point and continue up the list till they've gotten to the top, and then they go back down to the bottom. No, there's not separated between 7.5, 7.6. It's all just based on seniority.
And this is not a question, but I've gotten a note from the helpers over here. Didn't you just do a video talking about the ratio?
We did,
7.6?
And that video should be out, if it's not out already, momentarily. And it explains in detail how the ratios work. It shows a couple of examples of the staffing being properly manned and also undermanned, so you can take a look at how the formulas should work. And those formulas will be published on page 2 of the bid pack for both the 7.5 and 7.67.
Okay, it looks like that video is coming out tonight.
All right, good.
Andrew, why is the company getting first 7.6 with round dials only to have to modify them later? no idea they decide what to buy and when?
Yeah, I mean, that's it's a good question, but I mean, they don't actually come to us and, you know, say, how do you want to get these planes? I think they obviously want to get the planes as soon as possible because the fuel efficiencies and you know, the gains they're going to get there. So I think they wanted to get them on the property as soon as possible before sending them back to get the mod, which is not how the airplane comes off the floor at or the factory floor at Boeing.
Question about section 2.2b. If that section does not apply when the company is buying up lines, what will apply during those times? Can they theoretically drop the 7:6 ratio to 0 during those times?
What the company was concerned about and we understood is that if they're buying up in the same seat in both aircraft, 7.5 and 7.6, that the penalty payments of the R-24 additional lines would not apply for that bid period. Could they do that? Sure. Can the company, is the company going to try and game this LOA? Sure, they may, but we will hold them honest and true to what the terms of the LOA call for, as well as the rest of the contract. This LOA, if ratified, becomes part of the contract with its full force of the CBA, and we will vigorously defend the CBA and the LOA and hold the company's feet to the fire to do what's required by the CBA and the LOA.
All right. Will there be a proportional number of R lines built into each bid pack each month?
There are very few requirements in the CBA now to dictate what reserve lines will be built. There's a minimum requirement for a number of R-24 lines, 10%, and there needs to be at least one. But we have no contractual provisions that says the company has to build any kind of total percentage of reserve lines. They manage the manning that they need for each of the aircraft in our fleet. The thing with our ratios that we capture the scheduled flying. They have to have enough pilots in the seat to cover the scheduled flying each month, or they pay the penalty. So there's no gaming the system with that. If 7.6 flying will be in the 7.6 bid pack, they have to have the proper manning in the 767 aircraft to cover that scheduled flying. And the flying that drops off the regular lines or doesn't get built in the regular lines, it comes down to the secondary lines, they have to have the proper number of secondary lines to cover that flying. They also have to have the proper number of reserves, just like they do in every other bid pack, that cover the flying that ends up filtering down to the reserve pool.
Okay. What criteria will the scheduling committee chairman use to allow 7.6 flying in the 7.5 bid period package?
You know, that option was put in the LOA. It's an option for the association to exercise. We have full control over it, and it's the scheduling committee chairman for ALPA, our SIG chairman, who's currently Captain Rich Huey. The SIG deals with issues like this in line building and line construction every month through the entire bid pack building process and the execution of the bid pack. So this is strictly an option for the association to exercise. Is this something we're going to exercise on a routine basis? It's not even an option that we'll exercise on an infrequent basis, but it is an option when we see it fit to use, that we can use. It's not an option that the company can invoke. Strictly the association has control over this option.
Okay, and he'll take his direction from the chairman?
I would assume he would be
And
speaking to the
MEC?
chairman and the MEC prior to exercising that option.
All right. Is there going to be a Indianapolis 7.5, 7.6 domicile? Andrew?
That's a great question. I don't know. At this time, no. I mean, they have not. They have not come out and said there's going to be an Indy base. There has been talk about there might be a possibility of opening a domicile in Indy, but at this current time, I don't see that happening. Especially if what happens with the ratification of the LOA. I do see down the road further, the possibility with the reduction in the amount of deadheads and the flying in and out of Memphis, that it could be beneficial for the company to open different locations or different domiciles to position crew members there. But at this time, I do not see the Indy 7576 base.
Okay, next question. Will the teaching or training of the 7.6 simulator pay wide body pay or narrow body pay?
In the simulator for the instructors, you're going to get paid what your Section 24 award is. So if you're a 7.6 instructor, you're receiving wide body pay. If you're a 7.5 instructor, you'll get paid 7.5 narrow body pay. The pay differential only comes into play in the operation of the actual aircraft. For the instructors, obviously if you're flying one as a trip or if you are checking or evaluating on 767. Otherwise, it's narrow body pay.
Okay. Next question. If the company is able to pull from the 7.5 reserve pool, are the chances diminished that a 7.6 crew member would get called for draft pay should the company have the need?
Well, with the common pool, the chances for draft are there for both seats or both aircraft, 7.5 and 7.6. It'll be done in sheer order. So will the opportunity to draft be greater or less based on the aircraft you're in? No, because they're going to go in strict assignment order. For draft, it's done in reverse order. So as they come up the list, it'll be whoever is next up for a draft assignment. So the opportunity is there. It's a wider pool. If a 7.6 pilot is drafted for a 7.5 trip, he still earns wide body pay because he gets paid wide body for everything. Likewise, if it's a 7.5 pilot gets drafted and a 7.5, he gets narrow body pay. If the draft trip is for a 7.6, he'll get wide body pay differential.
All right. Wouldn't negotiating been a lot simpler by just making a 7.5 wide body pay, going to a same pay rate for all aircraft?
I don't know if I would use the word simpler. We looked at all the options going forward of how other properties flew the 767 and the 75. We looked at all the different ways and the pros and the cons. We discussed with the MEC about which route they wanted to go, and we felt, looking at the criteria that we wanted to get out of this LOA, we would this option that we chose was the best way to go.
Will a 767 pilot be able to pick up a 7.5 open time or vice versa?
No.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I'll get it. No. 25L bid line adjustments. You're separated, so you're in your own bid pack. The only time a 757 pilot would be able to fly 767 would be a reserve assignment or a draft assignment.
Can company combine these aircraft if this is turned down?
Steve, that is the $64,000 question. What the company can or will do, it's speculation on all of our parts. Understand that we do not have any clause in our contract to park the airplanes absent an agreement, like some of the other airlines had in the past. We have Section 26K, and that is limited in scope to the pay rate for the aircraft. And I don't think there's any argument about the 767 being a wide-body aircraft for pay. But the devil is in the details, and could they put it in a single bid pack and say the 757 and then pay you when you touch the 767? That certainly sounds a lot like their initial proposal, and I think the company believes they could do that.
Okay, next question. What will the flying look like? Will this aircraft be flown internationally? Will it be used to augment Cologne flying?
The cities that they've shown us so far were just domestic cities. They had a few focus cities, like I said earlier, that they were going to use to day turn and night turn the aircraft. Would it be used to fly internationally? Again, we're kind of speculating of what the company wants to do. They haven't given us their game plan there. I would say that if you looked at, for example, UPS and how they operate the 767, and I would assume FedEx would probably try to do something like that. Could I see it eventually, flying from, let's say, Newark to Cologne, and then you'd have trips that went over there, and then you would operate around in the European theater in the 75? Sure, I could see it happening, something like that. But again, the company hasn't shared with us our game plan, or their game plan, and as we always sometimes joke about, if when the crew position is announced and they come out with a sample bid pack, you always say if you want to see what the flying is not going to be, then look at the pairings in the sample bid pack, because things change drastically.
And Steve, another fine point on from what Andrew said, if they do start flying it internationally or anything else like that, we'll capture those scheduled credit hours. It'll cause an increase in manning because obviously internationally flying over the water adds credit hours. It's longer flying, so it'll boost up the staffing for the 767 equally.
Okay. Next page. How will we make sure the company is honoring the staffing ratio? What's to prevent them from understaffing the 76 and building a bunch of X pairings?
Well, the contract currently requires that all known flying at the time the bid pack is published be contained in the bid pack. So there's really not a mechanism for them to hide flying. Now they can, after the bid pack is published, they can build, and as they do in all the fleets, build X pairings. They have other lift requirements or other flying that does pop up during the month, and they're built into X pairings. Sometimes you have revisions that create X pairings, things like that. Those will go in to the respective open time. If it's a 7.6, has 7.6 flying on, it'll go into 7.6 open time. If it's purely 7.5, it'll go into 7.5 open time. Those scheduled credit hours, since they weren't known at the time the bid pack is published, don't count for that month. But if they occur next month and it's known flying, they'll be captured in the scheduled credit hours when the pairings are built.
All right. Other than staffing the aircraft, what other benefits does the company get from this agreement?
Well, the 767 aircraft allows the company, I think probably the biggest benefit is the exercise in the common type rating with the 757. There are 767s operating by a multitude of carriers around the world. There's a common parts, maintenance, common instructors for us. There's a whole laundry list that gives the company some benefits from having a common type rating with aircraft such as this, as opposed to, say, if they would have purchased the A330, which would have been a completely different aircraft.
Alrighty. Can Captain Larsen explain the ratio percentage used to determine 7.6 seats and pilots?
Sure. I'll go over the ratio again, and as we said earlier, there is a video coming out tonight. It's about 5.5 minutes long that does explain the ratios in detail. But in a nutshell, we take the scheduled credit hours of all known flying when the bid pack and the pairings are generated prior to the bid pack being published. So we take the scheduled credit hours of the 767 and we divide that by the sum of the scheduled credit hours of the 757 and 767 combined. That gives us the scheduled credit hour ratio. For the staffing, we do the same formula with the pilots. We take the 767 pilots and divide that by the sum of the 75 and 76 pilots. That gives us our minimum staffing ratio. We compare the two ratios, and as long as the minimum staffing ratio exceeds the scheduled credit hour ratio, the aircraft is properly manned.
Okay, this one has got a little lengthy, so hang on with me. Never mind. We'll go on to the next question. What's to preclude the company from undermanning the 7.6 captain position with an additional R-24 first officer lines in the 7.5 bid pack, or a 7.6 instead of a captain R-24 lines?
I mean, I think the way I'm getting the question, and I think they're saying is the company going to underman the reserve lines in the 767 and put more reserves in the 757 because they're paying them soft time at the narrow body pay rate, and then they can utilize them if they have 767 trips that need to be filled. You have to look at the ratio, the crew ratio, and the scheduled credit hour ratio. And if let's just say, for example, you took 50 R lines and you put them into the 757 reserve, without changing the total scheduled credit hours, it skews the ratio. So now they're undermanned on the 767. So no, we don't believe that the company is going to only put 2 reserve lines in the 767 and put extra reserve lines in the 757 to cover the anticipated 767 reserve trips.
Does the SBA only apply to the classic 7.6s, or are there other scenarios that may take place, SEBA or other domicile?
The SBA is designed to take care of the classic configured aircraft, whether they're 7.5 or 7.6. So if we're talking 7.6 classic airplanes, they would be in the 7.6 bid pack as an SBA if we have the triple mix variety on the property. Likewise, a 7.5 classic airplane would be contained in the 7.5 bid pack under an SBA in the 7.5. So the SBA is only designed to handle the classic configured aircraft, and only if we have the 3 variants of or combinations of classic and advanced cockpit.
Okay, how will passover be addressed if a previously qualified 7.5 pilot checks out before a new 7.6 pilot in this bid?
Passover will be handled just like it is. If you're on passover for the 7.5 and you get an intervening 7.6 award, your passover obligation ends when you activate as a 7.6 pilot. Now let's say you were a 7.5 pilot, so your activation is only going to consist of reaching your activation date that's determined by the company and completing the training that is required, whether it's differences training or the differences training, or the combination of that and the classic simulators when we go to that. So just like it is today, passover, your obligation is met when you activate in the 767 seat.
Okay, Andrew, on reserve, if assigned a 20-hour trip that has 6 hours of 767 flying, with the rest being 757 flying, how is that paid?
Anytime a 757 trip has a flight segment with a 767 in it, the entire trip pays at the wide body pay rate. So for that example, he said it was a 20-hour trip with 6 hours of 7.6, so it would pay 20 hours at the wide body pay rate.
All right, next one's please clarify that 7.6 Classic SBA can only be bid from a 7.6 bid pack.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. There's no crossing between the bid packs for open time or anything like that. The 7.6 SBA will reside in the 7.6 bid pack. Likewise, a 7.5 SBA would reside in the 7.5 bid pack. And that's hopefully clear enough. 7.6 in the 7.6, 7.5 in the 7.5.
Do reserve lines count towards scheduled credit hours?
No, they do not. It's scheduled credit hours. It's just looking at the credit hours that are built or provided to the PSIT for the in the preliminary and the final pairings to be built. So it doesn't look at the lines. It looks at how many scheduled credit hours of the total value of all the trips in the bid pack. It doesn't, like I say, it does not look at the reserve lines.
Next question. Where does the staffing penalty the company might go? Oh, I'm sorry. Where does the staffing penalty the company might pay go? To ALPA or to 7.5, 7.6 pilots?
Well, it does go to ALPA, but it goes to ALPA in the form of the 7.5 pilot that holds that R24 award. ALPA will get their dues money out of that at some form, but the penalty lines in the R24 are built into the 757 bid pack. They're awarded in seniority order on the monthly bid, and the pilots that hold the penalty R24 line is paid wide body pay. That pilot is paid wide body pay for everything he or she does for the entire month for pay purposes. And that difference in pay we paid on the 15th of the following month.
Captain Larsen, in your recent video you said regarding instructors, 7.5 instructors will be paid just like their 7.5 Section 24 line pilots and will be paid narrow body pay unless they are on pay only line and perform instructor duties on a 7.6 trip. So anytime an instructor, a 7.5 instructor, touches a 7.6, if he's checking on or instructing, he'll be paid wide body pay rate. I take that to mean that a 7.5 flex instructor conducting a 7.6 training event in a simulator, classroom, or any other device will not earn the wide body pay rate.
That's correct. A 7.5 instructor will receive the differential in the wide body pay when he checks, instructs, or operates a 767 aircraft. Classroom, simulator, any other device, he is paid as a 7.5 instructor, narrow body pay.
Next question, will there ever be a combined 7.6 or 7.5 bid pack in the future?
I'll never say never, but I would think if this LOA ratifies, this is what we've negotiated, then this will be what we'll be seeing going forward. That's not to say, you know, later down in future bargaining periods that we could bargain for something different, but going forward, I see it being the way that we have in the LOA.
Has the company addressed a new 7.5, 7.6 domicile?
No, the company has stated that their intention at this point is to have this 7.5, 7.6 flying done out of Memphis. There's nothing to preclude them from opening another combined base elsewhere, whether it would be Cologne, where we currently have 7.5 flying, or a new domicile somewhere. As Andrew mentioned earlier, you know, we've heard batted about Indy, you know, to pick a city. Who knows where the company could open one. So there's nothing to preclude them from opening another one, but they have not said that they intend to open another one at this point.
Andrew, what provision in the contract makes FedEx put reserve lines in the 7.6 bid pack?
There's, I mean, two sections, basically in Section 25 scheduling, that says what is the minimum reserve lines you have to have in a certain bid pack. It says you'll have at least one R24 line and at least one additional reserve line that covers any of the other RP, reserve periods, the RPs. Again, I think this question might be alluding also to the fact that some people think that the company is going to staff the 7.6 with the minimum number of reserve lines and put all the reserves into the 757 bid period package. But again, I mean, if you do that without adding any scheduled credit hours into the 757, it skews the ratio, and now they're undermanned in the 767. So I think the company will man the 767 reserve lines just how they need to fly the flying that's in the 767 bid period package.
Does the LOA affect passover pay for a 7.5 instructor currently receiving passover pay who can't hold the 7.6?
No. Instructor, just like anybody else on passover, has a award that triggered the passover. And obviously that award wouldn't be the 767 today because we've never had a Section 24 bid for it. So the passover is not affected if he can't hold the 767. He's still going to be in the 757 bid pack, holding whether it's Airbus, MD-11, or 777 that started his passover in the first place. So it has no effect on it.
Okay, big picture question here. What advantage is it for us to negotiate this LOA apart from the normal contract negotiations? And then what advantage is it for the company?
Well, the advantage to us in negotiating this and sending it out as a standalone LOA, the deal is here. This meets all of the goals set by the MEC and the officers and negotiating committee in how we think the 767 should be brought on this property and operated in the future. It meets all of our goals, and the deal is here and now to be had. The reason not to wait until Section 6, in my opinion, is that the company is taking delivery of these airplanes in the near future. They will post for the 767 shortly, whether this LOA ratifies or not. And how they introduce the airplane absent the LOA is up to the company. We will continue to bargain if the LOA is not ratified. But understand that the airplanes are coming, and as I said earlier, we have no provision to park the airplanes absent an agreement. So the airplanes will come. The company will not park them on their own volition, and the company will operate the airplanes. But the deal is here. This is the deal that the negotiating committee, the officers, and the MEC believe satisfies everything that we set forth to achieve in flying the 767 on the property. We take it off the table with the LOA, and it comes off our ledger. We won't pay for the LOA in Section 6 negotiations down the road in July or August as we're bargaining another section. The LOA is done, it's part of the contract, and we're flying the 767.
Andrew, are there any scenarios where, due to trip status, either makeup, trade, or PDO, where a 7-6 crew member can be switched to a narrow-body pay based on some company-driven schedule change?
No. I mean, you're awarded a Section 24 crew position of 767, which is a wide-body pay rate. And if they do a change to a 7.5, no, you would still be compensated at your wide-body pay rate.
Can the 7.6 bid pack contain 7.5 trips?
The 7.6 bid pack can contain 7.5 trips, as I said earlier. And the reason for that is to balance the lines, to assist in line building and meeting BLG targets and things like that. So yes, pure 7.5 trips can be in the 767 bid pack. Conversely, no 7.6 flying legs, not one leg, can be placed in the 7.5 bid pack. They're all in the 7.6 bid pack.
Okay, Andrew, as a 7.6 pilot, can I swap all my trips with 7.5 trips at open time?
No. As Scott talked about earlier, they're separate bid packs except for reserve and draft. So 25L is bid line adjustments, and if you go into that section and look, there's about 10, I think, different things you can do. But trading open time is not one of those. So you could not be on the 767 and trade into all 757 trips.
Okay, interesting question here. How does this LOA compare to the rest of the industry with Delta, United, Continental, etc., and their 7.5, 7.6 contracts?
Steve, one of the first things we did as we started investigating how we think the 767 should be flown is look at what the rest of the industry does. And by and large, the rest of the industry flies a 767 and 757 in different variants together. They exercise the common type rating just as FedEx seeks to do. What they do, though, is they pay it either a blended pay rate, that's a variant of the 7.6 and 7.5 pay rates combined based on a ratio of aircraft, of each type of aircraft, or they pay it a single pay rate that is blended in. So the difference is at FedEx that our difference between narrow body and wide body pay rates are vastly greater than what, say, Delta has between their different pay rates, or United, as they break out each pay rate. So say on some properties where they do pay it separately, you're paid by the leg, or you're paid difference for the 7.6 and the 7.5, but the difference between those two pay scales is $6, $7, $8. In our case, the difference between the two pay scales can be up to $40. So it's quite a bit different. Obviously, UPS has one pay scale, so they both pay the same.
Andrew, can the penalty R24 line pilot be assigned hotel or airport standby?
Yes. The penalty R24 line is no different than any other reserve line in the bid period package, other than it pays wide body pay for the entire month. You can be given any assignment by crew scheduling That could include, yeah, hotel standby, or, well, I guess technically you would not be able to get an airport standby. You could get a hotel standby, and then from hotel standby, they could launch you into an airport standby. But no, an R-24 pilot is not assigned an airport standby.
Is there a crew manning ratio per airplane for the 7.6?
Steve, you know, we looked at various things, and in fact, our first proposal contained a staffing based on crews per hull. The company does not staff the fleet that way. They look at credit hours. You can backdoor the math and get an average of what each of our aircraft are based on taking the number of aircraft and dividing it by the pilots that are in those aircraft. The company initially, as I said earlier, wanted to look at actual credit hours flown or dropped with pay. It's not a transparent or known number to us. It's something they would have to provide. That's why we decided on a scheduled credit hour ratio and the pilot ratio. Scheduled credit hour ratio is a known number, and it's a number that we readily receive today, and there's no hiding the known flying. It's something the SIG tracks.
All right. Hey, Andrew, good question here. If the company does interpret the LOA to our disadvantage and does so before we close Section 6 negotiations, would we be able to negotiate, change the LOA to fix the language?
Yes, yes, we would. One advantage toward it being in the Section 6 negotiations as we are now is we can, if this LOA ratifies by the crew force and the company starts to implement the 767s when they come on property in the November time frame, and like they found some area that they had they thought it meant something different than what the association thought, then yes, we're in Section 6 negotiations, we could bargain out the issue.
Okay, Scott, I guess this one's for you. Captain Larsen, in your recent video, you stated regarding pay for reserve and draft, 757 pilots will be paid for their current longevity wide-body rate if they block out on a reserve or draft trip that contains at least one flight segment of in a 767 or has wide-body rates attached. Can you explain what you meant by has wide-body pay rates attached?
Yes. I think it's obvious that a pure 767 leg or trip has wide-body rates attached. A trip that has one 767 leg in it and the rest 757 legs, a mixed line or a mixed trip as it were, has wide-body pay rates attached. Likewise, a 757 pure trip that is published in the 767 bid pack will be identified by pairing number or some other mechanism to state that that is a wide-body for pay pairing, even though it's a pure 757 trip. So that's what we meant by wide-body rates attached. And that stays with it throughout the life of the pairing or the trip as it goes through the various iterations that a pairing or trip can have. And also, if you hold trip guarantee and something happens to the aircraft or the pairing and it is revised, you hold trip guarantee, obviously tail swaps, things like that, wide-body rates are attached.
All right, very well. Andrew, math question. If a sub 7.5 trip for a 7.5 pilot is worth, say, $2,000, and the pilot is called out on a 7.6 trip that only pays, say, $1,400 because it's not as long, will the hours be broken down and the pilot paid the rate difference on the next mid-month check for the total number of 7.6 hours flown, regardless of the fact that he made more money for his 7.5 sub window?
Can you repeat the question, please?
No way.
No, let's make it easier. Let's not talk about dollars. Let's just talk about credit hours. So you're a 757 pilot, and like we talked about earlier, you have a 30 credit hour trip. The trip's canceled, so now you're put into substitution. So you have trip guarantee for the 30 hours. In that window, let's say they only used you once for a 10-hour trip on the 767. So obviously you only earned, you only got 10 credit hours, but you get your trip guarantee of 30. So you would be compensated 10 credit hours at the difference in your narrow body pay rate and the wide body pay rate on the 15th paycheck of the following bid period.
is minimum guaranteed tied to a monetary value or a credit hour value? Because you could fly a 7-6 trip and get paid get paid more having flown less hours than you could for a 7.5.
I guess the way of saying is you're going to get the grader up. I mean, you're going to have you got your 30 hours for your trip guarantee that was canceled that puts you into the substitution. So you've got that. And then if you flew all 7.5 trips in your sub window, then obviously you would just get the 30 credit hours. But if you flew a 7.6 trip that was 10 credit hours, obviously you're compensated at the wide body pay rate. So you would get those 10 credit hours. And let's just throw out and say the difference in pay rates is $30 an hour. So on the 15th paycheck of the following bid period, you would get a $300 increase to your check for the operating the 767.
All right, thank you. How many 7.6 instructors are qualified to be staffed because of this LOA? I'm sorry, how many 7.6 instructors are required to be staffed because of this LOA?
Well, Steve, we don't control who's hired as an instructor. If you look at Section 11 in the contract, check airmen serve at the discretion of the standards manager, and flexes or instructor pilots serve at the discretion of the training manager. We don't have any say or anything really to do with who they hire and retain as instructors. Having said that, if if an instructor pilot who can hold the 767 by nature of his Section 24 award, he's a 767 pilot for pay purposes, and if the company decides to retain or hire him as an instructor, he's paid as a wide body 767 instructor. So the company controls instructors' staffing.
Okay. If you were previously qualified and typed in the 7.5, 7.6 at FedEx and have been out of the aircraft in excess of 1 year, if awarded the 7.6, what training should be expected?
Okay, I'm going to go into the training world here. I want to say is if you miss 2 CMV cycles, then you have to go through the whole entire ITU. I think it goes how long you've been out of the airplane. So in the example that the pilot asked, I want to say yes, you're going to have to go through a full ITU course because you've been out of the airplane so long. Now, if it's shorter than a year and you only missed 1 CMV session, then I think you can go through a short recall.
Okay, why do we want to approve a 7.6 LOA now versus just including it as part of our TA? Are we giving up negotiating capital by approving something the company wants now versus part of the TA?
That's a good question. We answered that earlier. I'll be happy to answer that again. You know, negotiating capital or leverage quite often is fleeting, and it's also quite often in the mind of the person thinking we have leverage or don't have leverage. What leverage we did have, we exercised in executing this LOA. The deal is here to be had right now, and we need to take a good look at this LOA, and if it meets the needs of the crew force, it does meet the guiding principles set forth by the MEC to honor seniority, protect wide-body flying, and not be concessionary. It also meets the needs as far as transparent and clear language as possible. So by sending out as a standalone LOA and approving it now, we will address the aircraft that are coming on the property prior to us reaching a comprehensive Section 6 agreement, and we take it off our side of the ledger. If we wait until Section 6 is completely concluded with a successful TA, the aircraft will at a minimum be posted for in Section 24, and they'll be brought on the property and flown. How they're brought on the property and flown, it will be up to the company to decide, not us. With this LOA, we decide how the aircraft is brought on the property and flown, and that's why it's a standalone TA, LOA TA for your approval.
Okay, guys, we got time for one more question. Have you discussed how the RFO will work? I assume some point the 7.5 or the 7.6-300 will be flying some legs over 7 and 35. Are they going to be Are they going to type 7.6 FOs or type all the 7.5 FOs?
RFO flying will work just like it does today. The company will decide whether they're going to use RFOs or RF2 captains. Those are 7.6 flight legs, obviously, so they'll be built, put in the 767 bid pack, and we'll capture the scheduled credit hours, which will be an increase, and that will increase the staffing requirements depending on if they're RF2s or RFOs, as either 7.6 captains or 7.6 FOs. So they will go into the 7.6 bid pack, and if it's an increase in flying, it will naturally result in an increase in staffing requirements and more pilots being posted to the 767 in a Section 24 award.
All right. Well, it looks like we're out of time. I see we have a bunch more questions in there. I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to them. Scott and Andrew, I'd like to thank you for coming down and spending time to answer these questions. I know you guys are busy and your time's precious, but thank you very much for coming down.
Steve, thanks for having us. And the main thing for the crew members out there in our membership is to look at the LOA, read the LOA, get your information from a credible source. We're doing hub turn meetings, webcasts like this. We have a phone-in session next Wednesday. You'll be getting more information about that. Talk to your P2P reps and your block reps. Make an informed vote, but in any circumstance, vote. That will send the message to the company that the crew force is engaged and informed and participating in our contract negotiations. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, I want to thank all the people who logged on and made the effort to educate yourself on the LOA. Good picture. Like Scott said, the window for voting on the LOA is open, and it will be so until 12 April. For those of you who've already voted, thank you. For those who are still deciding, get your information, and like Scott said, go in there and make a vote. Nothing tells the company that we're engaged by a high turnout for this LOA. That lets them know that we're engaged not only in this LOA, but anything that comes down our way as far as our contract's concerned. Thank you for joining us today. Stay informed, stay engaged, and fly safe. Thank you very much.